in answer to that, I decided I would research every century of recorded human history to see what the most common form of government was. So I went back to Sumerian cuneiform on clay tablets, and the Elamites and the Persians and the Greeks and Romans, and the most common form of government in world history is kings. Hands down, it's kings. Nimrod, Tower of Babel, Pharaoh, Caesars. Power wants to concentrate into the hands of one person. It's no different than you put some kids on a playground and one's the bully. You put some junior high girls in a clique and one of them is the diva. You put some people in the woods, one of them is an Indian chief. You put them in an inner city, one of them is a gang leader. And all a king is a glorified gang leader. And it's a hierarchical system. If you are friends with the king, you are more equal. If you are not friends with the king, you are less equal. And if you're an enemy of the king, you're a slave or you're dead. I thought slavery started in 1619. No, wherever you had the first king on top, you had slaves on the bottom. And this model continued with technological advancements. Kings could kill more people, right? So instead of Cain killing Abel with a stone, they're killing with a bronze weapon or an iron weapon or a failing spear, scimitar, sword, gunpowder. The weapon improves, but it's that same fallen nature, Cain killing Abel. And also with technological advancements, kings could track more people. Do you know Augustus Caesar wanted to have a worldwide tracking system? It was called the census. That was like modern technology, 25 BC, right? He wanted to count. If he could have had 5G and cell phones and cameras, he would have tracked them that way. But as the centuries go on, the King of England had the biggest empire that planet Earth had ever seen. 13 billion square miles, 500 million people. Anyway, it's the sun never set on the British Empire. The King of England was a globalist. He was a one world government guy with him at the top. And America's founders decided they didn't like this one world government guy telling us what to do. We broke away and flipped it and made the people the king. So the word citizen is Greek. It means co-king. And where did the founders get these ideas? From the New England pastors. Where did they get their ideas? From the Bible. What part of the Bible? That first 400 years out of Egypt before King Saul. So it stands out as an anomaly in world history. Around, 1400 BC or so, you have several million Israelites come out of Egypt, and for 400 years they do not have a king. And it worked because every citizen was taught the law, and every one of them was personally accountable to God to follow the law. So you have an opportunity to steal. Nobody's around. Then you think, God's watching me. He wants me to be fair. He's going to hold me accountable in the future. Maybe I should hesitate stealing. And it creates something in your head called the conscience. If everybody in the country believes this, you can maintain complete order with no police. And I use a little analogy. We all have cell phones, and you have GPS, tells you where to turn. Imagine if there was a behavioral app that could tell you how to act in real time, right? It monitors your blood pressure in the volume of your voice, and it sees you're about to lose your temper, and it says, alert, don't lose your temper. And then it monitors your bank account, sees it's a little low, and it sees you're in an expensive store, and then there's nobody.
This already exists, Bill. I don't know.
And there's nobody in the vicinity, and it runs this algorithm. You're being tempted to steal. It says, alert, alert, don't steal. And so the law was like a behavioral app, and the Levite priests were the computer geeks that help you to download the app, right? Line upon line, precept upon press here, Google Store, Apple Play, whatever. But then the big question is, why would you follow it? What would motivate you to follow an internal moral? Ancient Israel had the key ingredient. There is a God who is watching everyone. He wants you to be fair, and he's going to hold you accountable in the future. Right? And so this is what America's founders, New England pastors, looked to as the model. That's why they taught Hebrew at Yale and Harvard. And so we took the power of the king, we separated it into the hands of the people. It would be chaos unless each person is taught the law. What motivates them to follow the law is they're accountable to God. This is what makes America unique from the rest of the world. Now, in Israel's case, I'm sort of rambling. Is this okay?
No, I think people are taking notes.
So in Israel's case, the priests stopped teaching the law. Eli, the high priest, his own sons are sleeping with women in the very tent where the Ark of the Covenant is. There's another Levite with a silver graven image in the house of a guy named Micah. The tribe of Dan comes along, steals the graven image, tells this Levite, hey, you can be a priest to our whole tribe. And you're reading the story, scratching your head, saying, what is this Levite doing with a graven image? Isn't that one of the commandments? You're not supposed to have them? And then there's the terrible story of a Levite with a concubine. And the law says the Levite's to marry a virgin of his own tribe. Here he is with a woman he's not even married to, so he's not following the law. And the house they're traveling is surrounded by sodomites. Something about that behavior, this abandonment to passion, this casting off of self-restraint. They bang on the door, rape the poor girl to death, and by the time you're grossed out, you read this line, every man did that which was right in their own eyes. Why? Because the priest stopped teaching them what was right in the Lord's eyes.
And that sounds a lot like where we're heading to today. And so, Bill, some people will say that there's nothing exceptional about America and that America is not a Christian nation. Tell us why that is historically incorrect.
So Muslims invading Europe, the Catholic King of Spain tries to stop them, can't. Then Martin Luther starts the Reformation, and the King of Spain tries to stop that, and he can't. And he finally makes a deal with the Protestants, and it's called the Peace of Augsburg of 1555. I took German in college, and you know how to say 1555 in German? 5555. I think it sounds funny. Anyway, 1555, Peace of Augsburg, it let every king decide what's going to be believed in his kingdom. And so suddenly, Europe, you had England being Anglican, Scotland being Presbyterian, Holland being Dutch Reformed, Greece being Greece Orthodox, Germany being Lutheran, Switzerland Calvinist, and Italy, Spain, France, etc., Catholic. And if you didn't believe the way your king did, you fled. And those were the people that spilled over and founded colonies in America. So I read through every charter of every colony. England, you had the Anglicans founded Virginia. Puritans founded Massachusetts. Congregationalists founded Connecticut and New Hampshire. Baptists founded Rhode Island. Dutch Reform founded New York. And the Swedish Lutherans founded Delaware and New Jersey. And Catholics founded Maryland. And then the Quakers founded Pennsylvania. So just like Europe, there was a different denomination per country. In America, it was more or less a different denomination per colony, and they didn't get along. And they would tar and feather each other. And then they had to join together to fight the King of England, very similar to the Peace of Augsburg, where the Catholics and the Protestants had to fight together against these invading Muslims. And so after the Revolutionary War, the attitude changed to, we may not always agree on religion, but you are willing to fight and die for my freedom. I need to let you practice your faith. So they began to tolerate each other, and that eventually turned into us tolerating other people of other faiths. But it was Christians that founded the country. And then I read through every state constitution and every amendment and revision to every state constitution. I have trouble sleeping, I guess you can tell. And did you know 9 of the original states of the 13, 9 of them in their state constitution required all office holders to be Protestant Christians? Did you know 3 states were more liberal and all you had to do was be a plain Christian? Right? Like Delaware, every office holder had to believe in God the Father, Jesus Christ, his only Son, the Holy Ghost, one God bless forevermore. You said that was plain. That's pretty liberal, because you could be a Catholic or a Protestant and say, yeah, I believe in Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Whereas in North Carolina, you had to be a Protestant Christian up until 1835. And one state had 0 religious requirements to hold state office. Rhode Island, founded by Baptists. And they said that if you required someone to be a Christian, they could say they were just to get elected, and that would be hypocritical. So just vote for the best Christian person. You know, we're just not going to put it in the Constitution. So that was the founding. It was those states that sent representatives to write our U.S. Constitution. It makes no sense to think they would outlaw themselves.
So, Bill, some people will say that's all fine and well, but what we need is separation of church and state. And I got in a debate with a professor from Wheaton College in Massachusetts where she said that's in the Constitution. Where do we get such an idea as separation of church and state?
It is interesting where the etymology of that comes from. So the first century of America, you had Calvinist denominations founding colonies. And the basic Calvinist thought is that God has a plan for your life, your marriage, your family, your church, your government. Dig in the scriptures, find out what God's plan is, put it into place. Pretty simple. But in the early 1700s, you had Lutheran pietists come to America. Now, why are they different? 1517, Martin Luther starts the Reformation, and he stands at the Council of Diet of Worms. I don't know, why would they name something the Diet of Worms? But it was a court hearing, and Martin Luther says, unless you can prove me wrong from the scriptures, here I stand, so help me God. It was a very personal revelation to Martin Luther. But some German princes wanted to break away from Rome. And they said, this is our chance. Kingdom of mine, guess what? You're all now Lutheran. And so the people in these kingdoms said, okay, king, we're Lutheran. What do we believe? So for the people in the kingdoms, it's not the same personal revelation that Martin Luther had. It's just a new state doctrine, a little more scriptural based, but it's just another state doctrine. And so a revival movement starts called pietism, that said being a Christian is more than state doctrine. You have to have an experience with Jesus. And when you do, your life will change. And you won't do the worldly things you used to do, like go to bars and brothels and lewd theater and get involved in government. Wait. What was that last thing? Yeah, government's filled full of worldly people. And so if you're really Christian and you're really spiritual, you won't get involved in government. There were actually German princes that would donate money to the pietists so they would teach their followers not to get involved in the prince's business. Could you imagine wealthy people giving money to woke denominations so they would teach their people not to get involved in politics?
I could name a few churches.
So in the early 1700s, these German pietists come to America, and they're teaching don't get involved. The ultimate of them is the Amish that said, oh, we're not even going to vote. Oh, it's all dirty. Don't get involved. And it comes to an interesting head when the founder of the Lutheran Church in America, a pietist pastor, Henry Muhlenberg, has two sons who are pietist pastors. Frederick Augustus is pastoring in New York. John Peter's pastoring in Virginia. And John Peter Muhlenberg hears Patrick Henry's give me liberty, give me death speech. And he goes to Washington and says, I want to help. And George Washington said, I am going to make you a colonel. Go get your men. So he goes to his church and he preaches Ecclesiastes, a time for all things, time to gather stone, time to scatter, and a time to preach and a time to fight. Takes off his clerical robe. Underneath he has a uniform. He has an altar call. 300 men of his church and the little churches he pastored kiss their wives goodbye. They ride off to become the 8th Virginia Regiment. He gets promoted to general, gets elected to Congress, and he's in the very first U.S. Congress. Well, when this is going on, his brother, Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, is writing him letters saying, you are getting involved in things which, as a preacher, you have nothing whatsoever to do. John Peter writes back and accuses his brother of being a Tory British sympathizer. His brother writes back and says, well, I just can't serve two masters. And then the British invade New York, burn Frederick's church. He decides maybe we do need to get involved. He gets involved in the revolution. He gets elected to U.S. Congress. He gets elected the first Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. The first Speaker, not Nancy Pelosi now, but back then the first Speaker was Lutheran pastor Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg with his brother John Peter. And what did they pass? The First Amendment. Does anybody think that they would pass an amendment to outlaw themselves? Pastors shouldn't get involved in politics, even though we are pastors and we did get involved. No, the First Amendment, as well as the first 10 amendments, were handcuffs placed by the states on the federal government. Right? Congress shall make no law. Who's limited? Congress. Congress shall make no law respecting. Respecting means concerning, neither for nor against. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. What was the establishment of religion? Well, it's what they had in Virginia. It's what they had in Germany. Three things. Mandatory membership. Everybody in Virginia had to pay taxes to the government, and the government paid the pastors. You think that's strange? That's still what they do in Germany today. My daughter worked in Berlin for 10 years. They write on the little W-2 what church you go to. The government withholds the money and pays the pastors. So this way the pastor doesn't have to get their hands dirty taking up offerings. Well, how's that done for them? Well, all the young people realize they can give themselves a 10% raise by not checking the church box. And so you have these empty cathedrals in Europe and all these kids identifying as atheists, and now Muslims are coming in and buying up the churches and so forth. So, but anyway, establishment, mandatory membership, mandatory taxes, and you could not hold public office in Virginia unless you took the oath of supremacy acknowledging the king as the head of the church. They understood what establishment meant. And so who did they limit? Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Why? Because many of the states did. Massachusetts and Connecticut had established the congregational denomination up until 1833 in Massachusetts. And so the first 10 amendments were handcuffs on the federal government, leaving the states to do whatever they wanted.
That's no notes, by the way. Have you ever seen anything like that? And it's any topic, by the way. I'm like, hey, how's your Persian history, Bill? He's like, funny you asked.